I woke up buried in twisted metal and sand, my aircraft nothing but smoking wreckage around me, staring into an endless ocean of golden death that stretched beyond every horizon. My mechanic Andre and I had exactly one thermos of coffee, no radio, and the Sahara Desert had just become our executioner. But what we discovered in those 5 days of hell would prove that sometimes the human spirit is more powerful than death itself. The question is, when you're stripped of everything and pushed beyond the very limits of human endurance, what remains? December 30th, 1935. The sky above the Mediterranean stretches endlessly blue as French aviator Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and his mechanic André Prévost prepare for what should be a routine mail flight from Paris to Saigon. Saint-Exupéry, already a celebrated pilot and author, adjusts his goggles one final time. At 35, he has already carved his name into aviation history, with daring flights across treacherous routes. But this journey promises something more, a chance to break the Paris to Saigon speed record and claim the substantial prize money of 150 francs that awaits the victorious pilot. Their Simoon aircraft, a sleek, single-engine monoplane, represents the pinnacle of 1930s aviation technology. With its polished aluminum body gleaming in the morning sun, it seems invincible as it sits on the tarmac at Le Bourget Airport. Saint-Exupéry runs his hand along the fuselage one last time, feeling the cold metal beneath his palm. Neither man knows they're about to become the protagonists of one of history's most harrowing survival stories. The departure is flawless. Their aircraft lifts gracefully into the morning air, climbing steadily as the sprawling suburbs of Paris shrink below them. Saint-Exupéry feels the familiar rush of freedom that comes with leaving the earth behind. The Mediterranean coastline fades below them as they soar toward North Africa, completely unaware that the desert below will soon become both their prison and their testing ground. For hours, everything proceeds according to plan. They navigate by compass and map, watching the landscape transform from the green fields of France to the azure waters of the Mediterranean, then to the golden expanses of North Africa. The engine purrs with mechanical reliability, and their fuel consumption remains within acceptable parameters. Saint-Exupéry allows himself to dream of victory, of the headlines that will proclaim their triumph, of the financial security the prize money will bring. But the desert has its own plans. At precisely 2:45 in the afternoon, somewhere over the vast expanse of the Libyan desert, their world begins to unravel. The first sign of trouble is subtle, a slight irregularity in the engine's rhythm that causes Saint-Exupéry to frown and tap the fuel gauge. The needle quivers uncertainly, and a cold knot of fear begins to form in his stomach. Within minutes, the situation deteriorates rapidly. The engine begins to sputter, coughing like a dying man gasping for breath. Black smoke starts streaming from the cowling, and the acrid smell of burning oil fills the cockpit. The instruments spin wildly as if possessed by some malevolent spirit. The altimeter needle drops steadily, 30 feet, 500 feet, 20 feet. "André!" Saint-Exupéry shouts over the roar of the failing engine. "We're going down!" Prévost, a seasoned mechanic who has faced mechanical failures before, remains remarkably calm. He quickly secures loose equipment and braces himself for impact. Through the windscreen, the desert floor rushes up to meet them with terrifying speed. The sand dunes, which had seemed so peaceful and beautiful from altitude, now appear as potential executioners, their razor-sharp ridges waiting to tear their aircraft apart. Saint-Exupéry fights the controls with every ounce of his skill and experience. The plane bucks and shudders like a wild horse trying to throw its rider. He searches desperately for a flat area, somewhere, anywhere that might offer them a chance of survival. The ground grows larger, more detailed, more threatening with each passing second. The impact, when it comes, is like being struck by the fist of a giant. The aircraft hits the sand at nearly 90 miles per hour, the landing gear crumpling instantly. The propeller, still spinning, bites into the desert floor and snaps with a sound like thunder. The fuselage bounces once, twice, then slides forward in a shower of sand and sparks before finally coming to rest in a twisted heap of metal and broken dreams. For several long moments, there is only silence. The kind of profound, absolute silence that exists only in the deep desert. broken only by the occasional tick of cooling metal and the whisper of sand settling around the wreckage. Saint-Exupéry regains consciousness first, tasting blood in his mouth and feeling a sharp pain in his shoulder. His head throbs with an intensity that makes thinking difficult, but gradually, awareness returns. He is alive. Somehow, impossibly, he is alive. André? He calls weakly, his voice barely a whisper. A groan from the other side of the cockpit brings immense relief. Prévost is stirring, pushing himself up from where he had been thrown against the instrument panel. His face is cut and bloody, and his left arm hangs at an odd angle, but his eyes are clear and focused. They help each other from the wreckage, moving slowly and carefully, assessing their injuries as they go. Saint-Exupéry's shoulder is dislocated, and he has several deep cuts on his face and hands. Prévost's arm is broken, and he walks with a pronounced limp. But they are both alive, and in their current situation, that seems like a miracle. As they stand among the debris of their aircraft, the full horror of their situation becomes clear. They are somewhere in the vast emptiness of the Sahara Desert, at least 200 miles from the nearest known settlement. The radio is destroyed, crushed beyond repair in the crash. They have no way to signal for help, no way to let the outside world know where they are or even that they have survived. Most terrifying of all, they have almost no water. Saint-Exupéry inventories their supplies with growing dread. A single thermos of coffee, already lukewarm in the desert heat. A small bottle of wine intended as a celebration for their successful arrival in Saigon. A few grapes and some chocolate. That's all. In one of the world's most unforgiving environments, they have perhaps one day's worth of liquid between them. The reality hits them like a physical blow. They are going to die out here unless a miracle occurs. The sun, which had seemed so benevolent during their flight, now reveals itself as a merciless executioner. As the afternoon progresses, the temperature climbs relentlessly. The sand beneath their feet becomes burning hot, forcing them to hop from foot to foot when they stand still. The air shimmers with heat waves that distort the horizon, making it impossible to judge distances or directions. By evening, they have managed to salvage what they can from the wreckage. They create a small shelter using pieces of the aircraft's fabric covering, hoping to provide some protection from the sun during the next day. They divide their meager water supply, allowing themselves just a few precious sips each. The liquid is warm and unsatisfying, but it provides a momentary relief from the growing thirst that already gnaws at their throats. As darkness falls, the desert reveals another face of its cruelty. The temperature plummets with shocking speed, dropping from over 100 degrees Fahrenheit to near freezing in just a few hours. They huddle together for warmth, shivering uncontrollably, their bodies racked by the dramatic temperature swing. Saint-Exupéry stares up at the stars, more brilliant and numerous than he has ever seen them. Under different circumstances, he might have found the sight beautiful, even inspiring. Now, they seem cold and distant, emphasizing just how alone and insignificant they are in this vast wilderness. Sleep comes in brief, fitful intervals. Every sound, the whisper of wind across sand, the distant call of a night-bird jolts them awake, hoping against hope that it might be the sound of rescue approaching. But rescue never comes, and morning arrives all too soon, bringing with it the promise of another day of suffering. The second day dawns clear and mercilessly bright. The sun rises like an angry eye, immediately beginning its assault on their already weakened bodies. Saint-Exupéry wakes with his tongue feeling thick and swollen, his mouth dry as parchment. Prévost's condition is visibly worse. His lips are already beginning to crack, and his eyes appear sunken in their sockets. They drink the last of their coffee and wine, savoring each drop while knowing it will be their final taste of liquid for the foreseeable future. The alcohol in the wine, rather than helping, seems to accelerate their dehydration, leaving them feeling even more parched than before. Despite their deteriorating condition, they refuse to surrender to despair. They take turns walking in different directions from the crash site, hoping to spot any sign of civilization, a road, a building, even animal tracks that might lead to water. They create signals from pieces of their wrecked plane, arranging metal fragments in geometric patterns that might catch the sun's reflection and alert any passing aircraft to their presence. But the desert stretches endlessly in all directions, an ocean of sand and rock that seems to mock their efforts. No roads cross this wilderness. No aircraft appear in the empty sky. They are alone with their thirst and their diminishing hope. As the day progresses, Saint-Exupéry begins to experience the first effects of severe dehydration. His heart rate increases, and he feels dizzy when he stands up quickly. His skin loses its elasticity, remaining tented when pinched. Most disturbingly, his mind begins to play tricks on him. He sees movement in his peripheral vision, shapes that might be people or animals, but when he turns to look directly, there is nothing there. Sounds seem to come from impossible directions, and he finds himself straining to hear voices in the wind that he knows cannot be real. Prévot's condition deteriorates even more rapidly. His broken arm has swollen grotesquely, and the combination of injury and dehydration is taking a severe toll on his body. Yet he maintains his composure, continuing to help with their survival efforts despite his obvious suffering. As the second night falls, they begin to discuss the possibility that they might not survive. But even in their weakened state, they make a pact. If one of them dies, the other must continue the fight. They will not let the desert claim them both without a struggle. This promise becomes their anchor, the thing that will pull them forward when every instinct screams at them to lie down and accept their fate. The third day brings new horrors. Saint-Exupéry wakes to find his tongue so swollen he can barely speak. His saliva has become thick and ropey, providing no relief from the constant burning in his throat. Every swallow is agony, and he finds himself obsessing over memories of water-cooled streams he had seen in childhood, rain falling on his face, even the mundane act of drinking a glass of water at a Parisian cafe. The hallucinations begin in earnest. As the sun reaches its zenith, Saint-Exupéry sees mirages that are so vivid, so convincing, that he starts walking toward them before his rational mind can intervene. Lakes of cool, clear water appear on the horizon, complete with palm trees reflected on their surfaces. Cities materialize in the distance, their buildings shimmering in the heat waves, complete with the sound of bells and the bustle of crowds. Each mirage dissolves as he approaches, leaving him standing alone in the sand, the crushing disappointment adding to his physical suffering. The desert seems to be playing cruel jokes on his dehydrated mind, dangling the promise of salvation only to snatch it away at the last moment. Prévost begins seeing lights in the distance, convinced that rescue is near. He points excitedly at spots on the horizon where Saint-Exupéry sees nothing but empty sand. The lights dance and flicker in Prévost's vision, sometimes appearing as distant campfires, sometimes as the headlights of approaching vehicles. They are nothing more than the fevered creations of a brain starved of moisture, but to Prévost, they are absolutely real. As the day wears on, their physical condition continues to deteriorate. Saint-Exupéry's skin takes on a grayish pallor, and dark circles appear under his eyes. His hands shake uncontrollably, and he finds it increasingly difficult to concentrate on simple tasks. The pain in his dislocated shoulder, which had been manageable on the first day, now feels like a constant fire burning in his joints. Prévost's broken arm has become seriously infected. Red streaks extend from the injury site, and he develops a fever that leaves him delirious for hours at a time. During his lucid moments, he speaks of his wife and children back in France, describing their faces in detail, as if he can see them standing before him. They attempt to ration their own saliva, holding it in their mouths as long as possible before swallowing, a desperate measure that speaks to their determination to survive. They also try eating sand, hoping it might provide some moisture, but it only makes their condition worse, scraping their throats raw and adding to their misery. As darkness falls on their third day, both men begin to confront the very real possibility that they will not see another dawn. The desert has pushed them to the very limits of human endurance, and they can feel their bodies beginning to shut down. Yet still, something deep within them refuses to surrender. The fourth day dawns with an ominous stillness. The wind, which had provided at least some relief from the heat during previous days, has died completely. The air hangs motionless and oppressive, like a heavy blanket pressed down over the desert floor. Saint-Exupéry can no longer produce saliva. His mouth feels like it has been stuffed with cotton, and his throat is so constricted that swallowing has become nearly impossible. His eyes burn constantly, and his vision has begun to blur. Objects in the distance seem to shift and move, and he can no longer trust what he sees. The hallucinations have become more elaborate and persistent. He converses with people who aren't their old friends from his flying days, his mother, even fictional characters from books he has read. These phantom conversations feel completely real to him, providing a temporary escape from the horror of his situation. During one particularly vivid episode, he believes he is back in his apartment in Paris, sitting at his writing desk, with a cool glass of water at his elbow and rain pattering against the windows. The illusion is so complete that he actually reaches for the imaginary glass, his hand grasping at empty air. When reality reasserts itself, the disappointment is so crushing that he collapses to his knees in the sand, sobbing dry tears. Prévot's condition has become critical. His fever has spiked, and he drifts in and out of consciousness. During his delirium, he believes he is back at work in his garage, calling out instructions to apprentices who exist only in his fevered mind. His infected arm has swollen to nearly twice its normal size, and the red streaks have spread to his shoulder and chest. Despite their deteriorating mental state, both men experience moments of startling clarity. During these lucid intervals, Saint-Exupéry finds himself contemplating profound philosophical questions. He thinks about the nature of human existence, about the bonds that connect all living things, about the incredible capacity of the human spirit to endure suffering. These thoughts, born from extreme adversity, would later influence his masterpiece, The Little Prince. In his delirium, he begins to see connections between his current struggle and the universal human condition. He realizes that their ordeal in the desert is, in many ways, a metaphor for the isolation and searching that defines all human life. As the day progresses, both men experience what can only be described as spiritual revelations. Saint-Exupéry feels an overwhelming sense of connection to all humanity, a recognition that their struggle represents something fundamental about the human experience. He sees that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to continue despite that fear. The bond between the two men deepens during their shared suffering. They speak of their regrets, their hopes, their fears about death. Prévot tells Saint-Exupéry about his children, describing their laughter and their innocent questions about why their father has to travel so far from home. Saint-Exupéry shares stories of his own childhood, of his brother who died young, of the books he still hopes to write. They support each other both physically and emotionally, taking turns helping the other walk when weakness threatens to overwhelm them. They share their remaining strength as they have shared everything else, knowing that their survival depends on their unity. As the fourth night approaches, both men are pushed to the very edge of human endurance. Their bodies have begun to consume themselves, breaking down muscle tissue to maintain vital functions. Their hearts race irregularly, and they experience periods of confusion where they cannot remember where they are or how they got there. Yet somehow, they find the strength to keep going. Perhaps it is their promise to each other. Perhaps it is simple stubbornness. Or perhaps it is something deeper and fundamental refusal to accept defeat that lies at the very core of human nature. The fifth day dawns with a strange quality of light that seems different from the previous mornings. The air shimmers with an otherworldly luminescence, and both men feel a peculiar sense of anticipation, as if something momentous is about to occur. Saint-Exupéry can barely stand without assistance. His body weight has dropped dramatically, and his clothes hang loose on his emaciated frame. His eyes have sunk deep into their sockets, surrounded by dark circles that make him look like a walking corpse. His mind drifts between reality and hallucination with increasing frequency, and he finds it difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is the product of his dehydrated brain. Prévot's condition is even worse. His fever has reached dangerous levels, and his breathing has become shallow and labored. The infection in his arm has spread throughout his system, and his skin has taken on a yellow pallor that speaks of organ failure. He can no longer walk unassisted, and spends most of his time lying in whatever shade they can create from pieces of their aircraft. As the morning progresses, both men resign themselves to the likelihood that this will be their final day. They have pushed their bodies beyond the limits of human endurance, and they can feel death approaching like a tide that cannot be turned back. They spend their remaining strength sharing final words, expressing their gratitude for their friendship and their regret at the dreams that will never be fulfilled. Then, just when all hope seems lost, when their bodies can take no more punishment and their minds teeter on the edge of madness, a miracle occurs. Through the shimmering heat waves, a figure appears in the distance. At first, both men assume it is another hallucination, another cruel trick played by their dying brains. They have seen so many false hopes, so many phantom rescuers, that they barely allow themselves to acknowledge the approaching shape. But this time, it's different. This time, the figure doesn't disappear as they watch. Instead, it grows larger, more distinct, more undeniably real with each passing moment. A Bedouin tribesman emerges from the desert, like an angel of mercy sent by divine providence. He is tall and lean, his face weathered by years of desert sun, his robes flowing in the slight breeze. He carries a goatskin water bag over his shoulder, and his eyes widen with shock and compassion when he sees the two dying men lying among the wreckage of their aircraft. The Bedouin approaches slowly, speaking in Arabic that neither Saint-Exupéry nor Prévost can understand, but his intentions are unmistakably benevolent. He immediately recognizes their desperate condition and acts with the quick efficiency of someone who has seen dehydration before. He kneels beside Saint-Exupéry first, supporting his head gently, while bringing the water bag to his lips. The first drops of water touch Saint-Exupéry's cracked lips like liquid salvation, and he feels as if he is being reborn. The water is warm and has a slightly brackish taste, but it is the most beautiful substance he has ever encountered. Saint-Exupéry later described this moment in words that have become legendary. "Water, you are the most precious thing on earth. You have no taste, no color, no odor. You cannot be defined. You are relished while remaining mysterious. You are not necessary for life. You are life." The Bedouin gives water to both men slowly, carefully, knowing that too much too quickly could be dangerous in their condition. He speaks softly in Arabic, his voice conveying comfort and reassurance even though they cannot understand his words. His presence alone seems to restore their will to live, proving that they are not alone in this vast wilderness after all. The Bedouin, whose name they later learn is Mohammed, is not alone. He signals to companions who appear on the horizon, leading a small caravan of camels laden with supplies. The nomadic tribesmen have been traveling across the desert for weeks, following ancient routes known only to their people, when they spotted the glint of sunlight reflecting off the wreckage of the aircraft. Mohammed and his companions work quickly to stabilize the two dying pilots. They construct stretchers from their equipment and carefully lift both Saint-Exupéry and Prévost onto the backs of their strongest camels. The motion of riding, which would normally be uncomfortable, feels like floating on clouds to men who have been walking on burning sand for 5 days. The journey to the nearest settlement takes 2 full days, but it passes like a dream for the rescued men. They drift in and out of consciousness, lulled by the gentle swaying of the camels and the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats on sand. The Bedouins provide them with water in small, frequent doses, and they gradually begin to feel human again. During the journey, Mohammed shares dates and dried meat with them, foods that taste like ambrosia to their starved palates. The Bedouins treat them with extraordinary kindness, sharing their own limited supplies without hesitation and going out of their way to ensure their comfort. Saint-Exupéry is deeply moved by this display of human compassion. Here, in one of the world's most desolate places, they have encountered people who embody the very best of humanity. The Bedouins ask for nothing in return for their help, expecting no reward beyond the satisfaction of having saved 2 lives. As they travel, Saint-Exupéry reflects on the profound lessons of their ordeal. He realizes that their crash and subsequent survival have taught him more about the human condition than all his previous experiences combined. He has seen the worst that nature can inflict upon human beings, but he has also witnessed the incredible capacity for endurance, friendship, and hope that lies within the human spirit. The small settlement they eventually reach seems like paradise after their ordeal in the desert. It consists of only a few dozen buildings clustered around a well, but to Saint-Exupéry and Prévost, it represents civilization itself. They are taken to the home of the village elder, where they receive proper medical attention for the first time since their crash. News of their rescue spreads quickly through the communication networks of French colonial Africa. Within hours, authorities in Cairo and Algiers are alerted to their survival, and within days, a rescue aircraft arrives to transport them back to civilization. The reunion with the outside world is overwhelming. Both men have lost significant weight, and their bodies bear the permanent scars of their ordeal. Saint-Exupéry's dislocated shoulder requires surgery, and Prévost's infected arm takes weeks to heal properly. But they are alive, and that fact seems miraculous to everyone who hears their story. The experience transforms both men in ways that will last the rest of their lives. Saint-Exupéry finds that his perspective on life has been fundamentally altered by his brush with death. The things that once seemed important, fame, money, recognition, now appear trivial compared to the simple miracle of existence itself. He becomes obsessed with capturing the lessons of their desert ordeal in his writing. The philosophical insights that came to him during his delirium in the Sahara become the foundation for some of literature's most profound reflections on human nature, survival, and the bonds that connect all living things. Prévost, too, is changed by their experience. The mechanic who had always been practical and grounded now speaks of their survival in almost mystical terms. He describes the appearance of the Bedouin as divine intervention, and he never loses his sense of gratitude for the miracle of their rescue. Both men maintain lifelong friendships with Mohammed and the other Bedouins who saved their lives. They return to the desert several times in later years, not as victims this time, but as pilgrims returning to a sacred place where they learned fundamental truths about themselves and about humanity. Saint-Exupéry channels his desert experience into his writing with remarkable results. The crash and its aftermath provide material for several of his most celebrated works, including Wind, Sand, and Stars, and elements that would later appear in The Little Prince. In his memoir of the crash, he writes with vivid detail about the hallucinations, the physical suffering, and the psychological transformation that occurred during their 5 days in the desert. But more importantly, he captures the spiritual dimensions of their ordeal, describing how extreme adversity revealed truths about human nature that might otherwise have remained hidden. The desert, he realizes, stripped away all the superficial concerns of modern life and reduced existence to its most basic elements: the need for water, the importance of companionship, and the incredible power of hope. In that reduction, he found something essential about what it means to be human. His description of their rescue by the Bedouin becomes one of the most moving passages in aviation literature. He portrays Muhammad not just as their savior, but as a symbol of human compassion and dignity. The encounter reinforces his belief that kindness and generosity are fundamental human traits that transcend cultural and linguistic barriers. The story of their crash also influences The Little Prince, his masterpiece about a pilot stranded in the desert who meets a mysterious child from another planet. The parallels are unmistakable. The isolation, the hallucinations, the philosophical revelations that come from extreme solitude. The Little Prince himself, with his innocent questions and profound observations, represents the clarity of vision that Saint-Exupéry achieved during his ordeal in the Sahara. Their story resonates far beyond the aviation community because it touches on universal human experiences. Everyone faces moments of crisis, times when survival, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, hangs in the balance. The tale of Saint-Exupéry and Prévost provides a template for how human beings can face such challenges with dignity, courage, and hope. The desert tested every aspect of their humanity. It challenged their physical endurance, their mental stability, their emotional resilience, and their spiritual faith. They emerged from that test not unscathed, but transformed. They proved that even in the face of impossible odds, human beings are capable of extraordinary things when they refuse to surrender. Their bond of friendship, forged in the crucible of shared suffering, demonstrates the power of human connection to sustain us through our darkest moments. They literally kept each other alive through their mutual support and encouragement, showing that survival is often a collective rather than individual achievement. The compassion shown by their Bedouin rescuers adds another dimension to the story. It shows that kindness and generosity are not luxuries that can only be afforded in times of plenty, but fundamental human traits that emerge most powerfully when they are most needed.